So I think Pierre-Alain's speech has been a great introduction for that chief talk. Maybe before we touch ground on 2 or 3 key topics that I'd like to cover, Jesper, you can introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I work for Arla Foods. I'm the head of our business in Asia, and I've done that for the past year. But 3 years before that, I was actually working in Mengniu, heading up Mengniu's marketing division in a similar fashion as Pierre is now heading up Mengniu's R&D and innovation. So we have a close bond, yes, looking forward to have a conversation with you.
Good. Myself, I'm Emmanuel Pouey. I've been working in the past 20 years in the spirits industry for a group named Bacardi. So you know the rum Bacardi, but it's also covering vodka, Grey Goose, Bombay Sapphire gin, US whiskey, and so on and so on. So a lot of brands. And I'm just about to join the largest group in olive oil in the world, which is called Deoleo, their Chief Innovation Officer next week. So let's cover a few topics. The very first one is about health. And actually health concern, health consciousness is big. It's not new. And it's quite legitimate that we all want to live better and we want to live longer. So the first question, and maybe for you, Jesper, is how does that health consciousness growing is influencing your innovation strategy and policy?
No, I think the health crunch is definitely there. On the one hand, we see lifestyle diseases. On the other hand, we see malnutrition. We see a growing population across the world, not the least in China, that we need to feed in a sustainable way. And there's pressure on that front as well. We see new trends like the quantifiable self that Pierre was just talking about, and layered solution where product and pack is no longer the only proposition. Services and solutions and communities adding on to that is part of the fabric of providing innovation to the consumer and delivering that in channels that didn't exist yesterday. And the final thing, less is more. Less sugar, less salt, less everything. I think those 4 dynamics is coming together in terms of what we need to deliver as an R&D community. And I think what we've done in Arla, as an example, was 7-8 years ago, we decided wholeheartedly that less is more. And we started a long journey, which isn't finished and which probably won't finish, of step-by-step weeding out ingredients that we didn't think was gonna belong in that journey. And as the lady just asked before, what's the trade-off between cost and taste and functionality? That is not an easy answer because it really depends on the situation that you're in. But doing it step by step and being willing to say no to things you don't want to bring to the market is part of that. But I think to sort of sum up your question, because of these dynamics that we are in, R&D plays a much more important role than it did before because it's no longer just about product and pack. It's about how it's delivered and in what way it's delivered in a completely new paradigm of a world.
I get that. I think, and to also to involve you in that, I was fascinated by your Google Map on diet. I think it's exciting project. And it's pretty much driven by health concerns. And is it anecdotal in your strategy, or it's really at the core of your innovation strategy?
No, I think it's really, we need to have a compelling value proposition for the future. And as I said, we are starting from, where we are, a company that has grown massively in 17 years. We want to we also realize that in order to continue to grow, we need to bring a very differentiated value proposition to consumer. So it's very core, it's very important. At the same time, we're very realistic. This is not the innovation pipeline. This is part of the innovation pipeline. Because we have so much low-hanging fruit today to start modulating the nutrition content of our product, to bring step-by-step better nutrition value. We also have very strong signal today when we look at what are our fastest growing SKUs and brands. Those are the brands that are minimally labeled. There is clearly a shift from the consumer trending up to pure milk from milk beverages, or going into fresh dairy product where they get more nutrition density.
Building on what you said, Jesper, you said that R&D is not anymore just about packaging. What are really the key R&D challenges that you're facing regarding product innovation, which are really related to the product?
I think that one of the key challenges is really in the starting point of R&D and innovation in the past. And a lot of that has been category driven. You need to invent the next yogurt, or you need to invent the next milk or the next milk beverage. You take a category starting point to what you deliver to the consumer, versus taking a needs starting point and a typology starting point. And I think both within Arla but also in Mengniu, working with a map of needs and typologies is something other industries have done for a long time. But if you want to drive that through an organization, a big, large organization, a complex organization, where you have an R&D community on one hand looking at their version of the map, a marketing community and maybe a sales community of their version of the map, you want to overlay these together so there's really only one map. Massive challenge. It's a massive challenge to get that into one paradigm in terms of language, in terms of definitions, in terms of really quantifying where the opportunities are. But once you start getting that right, you bring R&D and marketing, for a lack of a better word, into an alignment which is not about inventing the next product, which is not necessarily going to lead you to the SKU proliferation trap, but it's going to lead you to really addressing spaces within that map where there is opportunity. And just to add to that, I really think that Nike has got it right before anybody else. Back to Pierre's point about digitalization and the quantifiable self. Nike is not selling me a sports shoe. Nike is selling me a community. What's the equivalent of that, back to Pierre's point, and how does that impact R&D? That means you need completely different competencies in R&D versus having dairy engineers, for example, in a dairy company.
Let's talk about one example. I don't know whether these kind of products in your industry have made their way to the shelves already in China, but we can see in some part of the world the emergence of products which are products medicine, which not only deliver the benefit of nutrition, the benefit of pleasure and indulgence, but serve also as a medicine, like yogurts that helps you to reduce your cholesterol, for instance. Is it something you believe in? Is it something that is a niche? Is it something that you see very big in the future? Pierre-Alain?
So clearly, what we strongly believe in is to deliver health through food. We're not a pharmaceutical company. We're not going to invent a pill where you ingest that pill, although it could be empowered by the goodness of milk. But I think the human has one pleasure, and it's about eating. Taste is very important. The cultural context is very important. But there is a new aspiration, is to, or just an incredibly biggest awareness that there ever was before, in terms of connecting that this product is good for me, and it really empowers my health. Step one. Step two, today we are measuring everything. Everybody in this room, they're obsessed with their KPI. In our daily life, we walk out of here and we look at the number of steps that we've been walking during the day. In my view, there is no reason why in 5 years from now, or it's coming. It's 5 to 10 years, but we're going to look at how we're doing with the food intake. Did I get enough protein today? Did I get too much fat? What should I be doing? And that will drive consumer choice. But holistically, it's going to be the food and beverage product. It's not going to be medicine food that will be part of the solution.
Jesper, anything on that?
No, I think Nestle just announced, I think it was last week or the week before, that they're investing hugely into the area of medical food. And I don't think, we're also not going to be a producer of any kinds of pills, but we have in our pipeline today, actually we're selling it today, a product called Protein, which is particularly targeted to patients that have immunology diseases or cancer patients who who cannot eat a lot, but who need a concentrated intake of nutrition that tastes okay. And that simply hasn't been available. So we are moving in that direction as well. If you look at the dairy map in terms of how many occasions it drives and the business that's sitting there, it's very interesting, but it's a little bit far away from core dairy versus drinking a glass of milk, so there's a journey there as well.
Good. So closing a little bit on that first topic, I must confess that I feel a little bit awkward representing the spirits industry, talking about health. That's not exactly two things that are well related. But I must say that even in this industry, you've got some examples of very strong R&D programs. I would mention one to give you a sense of what can be done also with alcohol. This is a program that was conducted by Professor David Nutt. He's an English scientist, a big expert in drugs, who worked for the government. He's professor at the Imperial College of London, and has been studying for a while already to create synthetic alcohol that could be the substitute of the alcohol inside beer, inside wine, or inside spirits. Basically working on benzos, which is a chief ingredient of Valium, and replacing that. And the particularity of that is that the benzos would act on the brain to give you the pleasure of the alcohol, meaning the relaxation and the well-being, but wouldn't act on the other part of the brain, which give you the hangover, the drunkenness, the loss of control, the alteration of mood. And the beauty of it is that that's a kind of alcohol that you could switch off with a pill immediately after injection. So you can drink, and then you take that pill, and it shut off your alcohol, and you can drive safely home. So that's absolutely a fascinating program. But it's not fairly funded, and I think it's taking a while, because it goes with the problems with regulators. It's about pharmacology, and you would bet that the industry is not so excited also about that kind of development. So even in alcohol and in spirits, you can see big research programs to transform the product. Moving to the second topic, which is about regulation, and namely flavors, artificial flavors, natural flavors. I think we've got an expert here because, Pierre-Alain, you've worked a long time in the flavor industry. How do you navigate the extreme complexity of the regulation regarding flavors?
Okay, I think the topic is broader than just flavors. Clearly, today, what we see in China in particular is two things. On one hand, there is under-regulation, and that applies typically to the field of the flavor houses, where today you know, when you have a flavor in the product, you label it flavor, whether it is an artificial flavor or a superb natural flavor. There is no differences for the consumer from a regulation in the labeling. And I think this is broadly misleading. On the other hand, there is an over-regulation or a blockage of regulation by the authorities because of all the food scandals, unfortunately, that happen in this country, where China has become very shy in empowering new ingredients that actually can deliver benefits in a product from a health standpoint or from a sugar reduction standpoint and so on. And this is extremely complex indeed in China. I wish that we're going to be harmonizing a regulation in the fastest possible way to have one regulation fits all country, because that will be all our consumers are becoming global through internet anyway.
Makes sense. Jesper, in your view, we've got too much regulation or too little regulation? Because you can have both problems.
Well, I think we have too many ingredients. So I think, and I think we see a movement from slim label, so less fat, to clean label, and I think it's always going to be complicated to navigate, and there will always be new ingredients. And I think the starting point could be one that starts with the consumer from a clean label standpoint. If you take a look at our cream cheese, for example, you turn it around and look back of pack, and you take a look at any other cream cheese, I won't mention names, but you just look at the label. And we have a very, very short label. There is no artificial ingredients, there's no stabilizers in there. It also means that when you have the cream cheese in your fridge and the next day you will see a little bit of water on top, because that's what happens to cream cheese. The water sits on the top. It's called synerasis. And some consumers don't like that. And that can then become a problem in the proposition. But then you have to make a choice as a company. Is it who you want to be and who you don't want to be? I think that attack it from there will make your life easier, at least from a regulation standpoint.
You mentioned, Pierre, that you wish we were in the way of getting to universal regulation. Do you think that's really possible? Do you think what drives the different legislation? Is it about protectionism? Is it about ignorance? Is it about development stage?
I think what really drives regulators, first of all, we need to understand who the regulators are. Those are government bodies, all the time. Whether they are reporting into the European Parliament in Europe or the Chinese Health Ministry in China. And at the end of the day, their key objective is consumer safety. Safety, 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 safety. And I think it's a very, I understand their perspective, where they're really putting a trigger as high as possible to assure consumer safety, because that's really their responsibility. But at the same time, there is also a need for all the industry to communicate better about those ingredients and to do some consumer education for everyone to be able to relate when you read the label to understand what is behind that. So more transparency is required and probably some trade-off from the regulators.
To build on a question that someone asked earlier on the balance and the choice, the trade-off between cost and quality, do you think that the cost is the main driver why industry very often is choosing artificial ingredients versus natural ingredients?
If you look at how China is developed, and you put the cursor back 20, 30 years ago, the name of the game was to have a product out there in the retail space to be sold at 1 RMB. And of course that has driven a lot of R&D professionals to formulate with the cheapest possible ingredient. Hence, there is a big heritage in having a lot of artificial ingredients nowadays in the product. But now the game is changing completely. There are 3 million consumers visiting Starbucks every day. And these 3 million consumers in China buy mostly a cup of cappuccino or latte. That comes down to 34 RMB a cup. If you go to the convenience store, the most expensive product that you can buy in the convenience store is probably around 6, 7 RMB, or maybe 8. So that shows that if you bring better value, you can actually climb the ladder and you offset completely the cost barrier.
So Jesper, you're convinced as well that even in commodity products, you can have a way for premiumization?
Yeah, and I think that there is a real possibility that going more natural and going more simple is not just about premiumization. That I think this is something that's going to cut across the portfolio, and we need to find ways to come to terms with how we deliver that in a cost-efficient way where we don't have to take the shortcut adding ingredients simply because of cost. I'm not imagining that we will be in a world without, but I think we're going to see the balance shift. And to mention, I think we've been on a slippery slope for many, many years of every year salaming the recipe to a less version of the recipe the year before. And when you compare to the recipe the year before, it's fine. If you compare to the recipe that you started with 10 years ago, it's no longer fine. And I think we're going to see sort of a transgression towards where we came from in the food space, also in China.
Good. So in the interest of time, let's move to our third topic, which is food safety. A very, very important topic. How do you how do you balance the absolute need for food safety and at the same time your absolute need to remain competitive and deliver the bottom line?
When it comes to food safety and talking about food safety in conference like this, I see a lot of people having a kind of a nasty smile on their face because I represent Mengniu, and everybody knows that in 2008 Mengniu was not in the best position when it came to food safety. However, food safety, that event has been a defining moment for Mengniu. And one of my first positive surprise in joining this company was the relentless obsession that the R&D community, the quality community, and the manufacturing community, and our CEO have each and every day on food safety. The other key element is that food safety was one of the drivers for Mengniu to go and look for rescue and inviting Arla to jump as a partner. And we have built the first step of our collaboration in the area of food safety, and in particular on the meal collection, where Mengniu has stolen with pride few elements from the best food safety system in the world that has been designed by Arla with the Arla Garden, where you actually get to multiple control points and you make sure that the milk that you collect is absolutely perfect. And Jesper can maybe elaborate more because he was more the source of that than I have been.
No, I think I just echo that. It's completely fundamental. And there's a realization, and I think it goes across the industry, that without food safety there is really no industry. And I think that the journey that Mengniu and other companies have been on has closed the gap rapidly. And I think we have also not seen since 2008 major issues to that extent, which is good. I do want to say though that I think food safety has sort of the wrong connotation to it from foreign companies, because including our own company, we've sort of said, well, we're 100% European, we're like this, like that, therefore this is the proposition. It doesn't work. It's not a differentiator. We're past that several years ago, in my opinion. Food service is a ticket to the game. You have to have food service, but it's not a differentiator anymore. It's just completely basic. And to back that point, today you can buy imported dairy at e-commerce at significantly lower price than you buy the local equivalent. But we haven't seen a major rush to local dairy. 98.5% of local dairy is still bought from domestic companies. Consumers are voting with their wallet. So I think it's an overplayed card when it comes to what consumers really want. Consumers want safety, but the purchase trigger lies somewhere else.
You know, it's fascinating because when I was boarding my plane to come here to Shanghai, I could see a few people packing and depacking their big suitcases, and I could see a few of Chinese people flying with me. They had some infant milk powder in there that they brought abroad, and they were bringing back to China, which gives a sense of the lack of confidence they would have in the product. So once you lose that, it's very difficult to get it back. How do you think you can convince and positively say that you're trending to a zero-risk product?
I think we had a very good example this morning from the professor of the university presenting the outlook of the China industry as seen by the government. And in his presentation there was a very key point related to the environment. So no matter how hard you work on food safety, it's fair to say that the environment is still not as clean as it could be. So there is a difference. In that context, for infant milk formula, Mengniu has invested massively in New Zealand, and today we manufacture all our infant milk formula for China in New Zealand, under a Chinese brand, Yashili. So that shows that for this particular area, it is a concern. I think over time this will eventually disappear, but this is contingent for the country to make massive headways in containing air pollution and in containing water cleanness as well.
So maybe one very last question on that, which is related to R&D efforts linked to food safety. And let me give you an example. In the spirits industry, we have a major food safety issue, which is not related to the way we produce, but which is related to counterfeiting products. So, and it's massive. You've got something like 10,000 people, for instance, dying every year in Russia because they drink counterfeited products which are not proper for human consumption. So it's a very serious issue. And the industry has been invested millions of dollars with suppliers in developing solutions. None of them are perfect, but from tamper-evident devices, from tags. Now the digital technologies will help us with the communication on the tags you can have and the direct authentication on shelf of the product with a smartphone. So there are a lot of things going on trying to tackle that issue. Unrefillable devices, because counterfeiting is most of the time they take a bottle and they refill it with a product. So it's very difficult to detect for a consumer. So we've places enormous money in multiplying the different protection that are possible. Is it something you're pursuing as well in your industry?
No, I'd say there is a very elaborate alert system in place in China today within the dairy sector. Does it catch everything? No. Now you have small QR codes available that you cannot replicate, where the consumer can scan this code and be absolutely sure that this is not a counterfeit product. That technology is already available today. I know this is a technology that you're looking into, but you're right. I think this is one of the issues which we continue to have.
From if I wear my R&D hat, I think the packaging industry is doing a great job in empowering food and beverage branded company to start isolating themselves from counterfeiting through uniqueness of QR code, and that you cannot copy. Simply, it's impossible. And by scanning your QR code, you're going to be seeing the farm where your milk is coming from, when it was collected, how it was collected, when it was transformed, and from which point of time this product has been in the retail chain. Those are very important elements to support consumer confidence. The second point is that I strongly believe that there are ways where you can actually create a DNA in the content of your product to demonstrate what is and what is not a counterfeit. And taking an example that I know very well, in the flavor industry, they're pretty good at inventing unique molecule, captive molecule, and by having, for specific products, a flavor that contains a captive molecule, in case there is a problem, you can actually prove that this is your product or not your product based on the traceability of that captive molecule that you would find through a GCMS analysis. So there are many ways where you can actually create barriers to assure that it's yours. But I think ultimately also that's where measurement technologies are going to be very, very helpful, because actually if you don't really trust, you can, there are devices today where you can actually drop one droplet of a product in a device, and the device will do a very quick analysis and tell you if it is proper for consumption or not.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think we've covered more or less what we wanted to cover. Let's hand over to you, to your questions.
Nora.
I think on the one hand, food safety is kind of the starting point or the entry level from consumer needs perspective. On the other hand, there's ongoing trend of customerization. So in your company, what is your plan to focus which trend will be the key leading driver for your innovation? So there are basic trends and more sophisticated trends.
The question is for whom?
I think it could be for both of you.
So let me check my understanding. Your question is what drives our innovation?
So, I mean, overall speaking, there are very basic consumer needs like food safety. On the other hand, there are more sophisticated ongoing trends like customization and indulging in terms of sixth senses. So how would you leverage all the different trends and identify what are the key drivers for your innovation development?
I think that the key is very much to dig deep into your consumer need states and to really understand what drives the consumer needs and what is the moment of the consumption. And this is very broad. If you look at multiple categories, you have commonalities and differences, and basically our job is to really dig deep in consumer need states, to understand what are the underlying drivers, what are the basic needs that we need to fulfill, making sure that we can promote the solution that fulfill those needs, and that we have a solution that is actually going to be delivering at the moment of truth in the right moment of consumption. It's not only one trend, it's very complex. If we are in fresh dairy, it's different than if we are in ambient. If we are in ice cream, it's again very, very different.
Yeah, and a slightly different angle on it. The fact is that in the past, as long as I have seen data, 5 years back, the frequency of dairy consumption and the amount of dairy that you consume when you consume is flat. So we haven't really created a habit of dairy consumption. If you see a picture today with a Chinese family around the dinner table drinking milk from a glass, you know that picture is not right because that's not how dairy is consumed. So we have a massive opportunity to enable dairy as a daily habit in China, focusing on basic nutrition. So it's not all about something which is going to happen 10 years from now. We have major opportunities right under our nose.
I have a question for Pierre. Just now you mentioned that it's so difficult to balance the food safety and to keep the competitive strengths. Under the current situation in China, the consumers' lack of the confidence for the food safety, especially for the dairy sector. So my question is that some concerning to collaborate with the competitors to fight for the food safety? And if yes, and how? Thanks.
Very good question. I think you're spot on with your question. What we see today in China, in the dairy industry, is that having the industry working together to communicate about the standards, to communicate about inspiring consumer trust in Chinese dairy is not happening yet. Illy has an initiative with Friesland. We have our own initiative with Arla on the sourcing. But at some point, I think it would be very beneficial for the consumer that all those programs are coming together, that there are much stronger government, private platforms established in order to communicate about all the work that is being done to deliver on this basic element. Because the intention and the actions are happening. I think Joanna had a question.
Okay. For all of you, I don't know what is your company R&D spending now in terms of revenue, because this differs a lot. So with R&D growing role and also in the forefront of all this innovation, do you foresee in the future the R&D spending will be increasing? Because traditionally for food and beverage industry, it is very low.
Yes, you're right. It is very low in international standards. It is even lower in China and much lower. I think what I was trying to convey today during the presentation is that suddenly there is a realization that that has to change. And clearly today we are at less than 0.5% of revenue in R&D spend. Our objective is to, as a starting point, is to gradually become at international standards in the area of 1 to 1.5%.
Maybe I can also elaborate on that one, because I think the R&D spent, yes, is part of your willingness and demonstrate how big you want innovation to be, but that's not the only criteria for success in my sense. I would place probably higher, and it goes together, but I think my experience is that I would place first the tone at the top. I think if the CEO of the company, whatever the size of the company, is not absolutely convinced by innovation and is not putting that in the very first 3 points of his priorities for the company, there is no way the company is going to dedicate the money and dedicate the time and you're going to launch new products. Because the number of barriers you face when you are leading innovation are just huge. It's not just like cracking a good idea with consumers. Companies are full of, and it's not a criticism, that's just the way we are, but companies, usually multinationals and big companies, are full of left brains, rational people. And rational people bring in rational people because they understand rational people. And innovation goes with right brain, which is about creativity. So when you have creative people working for rational people, they're going to always have very good rational reasons not to believe in what you're doing. So it's very tough. So yes, the R&D spend is important because without it you go nowhere. But the very, very first thing for me is the tone at the top. It needs to be very top priority in the agenda of the company. I don't know if you agree with that, but.
Maybe just a last comment. I think what we're seeing, and I think, Pierre, you are in that as well, that if you look to Silicon Valley, 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, that was very tech-driven. Now you see a lot of food startups, a lot of food technology, and a lot of equity, private equity gravitating. And this is a really interesting way of funding your innovation early on. Instead of buying something or getting part of something downstream, getting intimate with it very early and look at your innovation pipeline and said, do I have 5, 7, 8 potential startup or projects in my portfolio that can contribute to my innovation? In Europe, we would be very obsessed with publishing. In the US, they are very obsessed with starting up companies, and there's a great marriage between the Chinese market and those startups because the Chinese market, if you find somebody who can help you on the Chinese market, you know, it's potentially a good fit.
That's right, and this is exactly the approach of the UC Davis collaboration, is also to identify startup company that we can take very quickly on at a low cost and enable them to grow massively.
Maybe we take one last question. I see we still have 4 or 5 minutes.
It's time for lunch. I have a very stupid question, just as a consumer for myself. Based fresh milk product and then reconstituted milk, which you recommended to me for drink in the lunch?
So between fresh milk and reconstituted milk, I would definitely recommend fresh milk.
Excellent. I think we are done. And now we break for lunch, I guess. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay.